Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I thought it would be fun to have a discussion with you guys, the viewers of the channel, the folks who follow me on Twitter, about everyone's current overall opinions on the Switch 2. As of right now, the Switch 2 is about a month and a half old. We're close to a week removed from the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza, which, as we know, was the first big brand new game to release for the Switch 2 after the launch day, which itself included Mario Kart. So Donkey Kong kind of represented that first new game after, again, that launch day and all of the hype. It's a very exciting time, and so I would say around 2 weeks ago, I thought it would be fun to pose the question to you guys on Twitter about how you're feeling about the Switch 2. What are your opinions, the good, the bad? Just give me your organic thoughts, and I would make a video discussing and featuring some of your guys' responses. Think of this as my version of market research, even though I'm just a dude with a YouTube channel and a microphone and a camera, and every once in a while, some free time to make a video for you. Now, it should be noted, a big disclaimer I want to make before I actually start reading some of your guys' thoughts and comments and discuss and break them down, is that, like I said, I think I put the request out. What was the actual date? I want to say it was close to 2 weeks ago. It was July 11th. Okay, so 11 days ago from the day that I'm recording, because I'm recording on July 22nd. So that's when I put the request out. I got like a ton of responses within the first like few hours. So I had a lot to sift through and find good stuff to talk about. And it needs to be noted that I intended to be able to make this video before Donkey Kong released. However, I didn't get that chance because life is busy, work is busy, things are busy, music is busy, and I just haven't had the time. So I am reading responses from you guys about your feelings around the Switch 2 and the library and the features, and like I said, the good and bad before the release of Donkey Kong. And it's important to note that because I think that after Donkey Kong, a lot of people's opinions might change, hopefully for the better, because suddenly here's the second big first-party Nintendo game for the Switch 2, and that would probably factor into how people feel about, like, the library, for example. Unfortunately, a lot of people talked about how they're happy or unhappy with Mario Kart, for example, and the library. Some people liked it, some people didn't. And a lot of people mentioned, I really can't wait for Donkey Kong because then I'll have another game to play. So I tried to avoid answers that have any reference to Donkey Kong. I might have one or two in here. And so it's just an unfortunate coincidence in timing that I couldn't make this video before Donkey Kong. So I just wanted to put that caveat out there so when we're factoring in how people felt about the Switch 2 when they made these comments, we just all have to know they made these comments before Donkey Kong released. Hero Shade at Shade of Hyrule kind of gives a pros and cons list. And they say the good is that the hardware is better than I expected. Screen size, feel in the hand, solid Joy-Cons. They love the third-party games that they've played, like Cyberpunk and Street Fighter. Love the visual upgrades to old games in playing Pokemon Violet and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. They also say needs improvement, or cons, I guess you could say, is that there needs to be more first-party games, again, because this is before Donkey Kong released. The Wi-Fi is slow for downloading games from keycards. They say LAN is better. And battery life could be longer. Now, this kind of encompasses a lot of what a lot of people kind of said. There's a lot of folks doubling down on how they're mostly enjoying playing the improved version of Switch 1 games. A lot of people talk about the battery life being a big negative, the lack of games, again, before Donkey Kong had released. Something that this person says, though, is that they say the Wi-Fi is slow for downloading the games from keycards, where you need a one-time download from your physical keycard, and then the game is there, and you never need the internet again to play or access the game. And then they say LAN is better, and I'm like, okay, but isn't that the same for any console? I mean, if you're using your PlayStation, your Xbox, or your Switch wireless, connected to Wi-Fi, yeah, it's going to be maybe a tad less efficient than if you use a LAN cable. And the Switch 2 dock allows you to use a LAN cable, so you either use or don't use LAN, maybe you're on Wi-Fi, and so sure, things are going to download maybe a little bit slower. Outside of that, they mentioned that the hardware is better than expected. I think a lot of folks, even if you were kind of on the fence or maybe not impressed, but still decided to buy a Switch 2 anyway, a lot of us probably felt as soon as we opened that box and saw the Switch 2, held it in our hands and connected those Joy-Cons, like you saw me do in my own unboxing video, it's like even before you turn the thing on, it is so sleek, it is so beautiful, the screen is so massive, and it's just impressive. It feels like very impressive tech for a handheld next generation hybrid Switch device. I mean, it's kind of, in terms of the tech and like the quality of the build, I think it immediately jumps out to everyone as better. They also mentioned the feel in hand, and I obviously agree with that. I've been talking about for a long time how part of the reason I stopped playing the Switch 1 portably almost entirely, there's a few reasons. One of them is that it just wasn't comfortable because it's very thin and the Joy-Cons are small and everything feels very cramped, and it just wasn't a comfortable experience. The Switch 2, it's not ergonomic. It's not improved in terms of ergonomics, which is unfortunate, but just being bigger and having taller, bigger Joy-Cons, even when playing handheld, is a nice improvement. And so I definitely agree with that. And they talk about the third-party games they like. I think the third-party launch library was mostly strong, except for the fact that they're all just ports of previously released games. But games like Cyberpunk and Street Fighter, they're very impressive, and it's nice to see what the Switch 2 can do there. McCoy at McCoy Maddie says, loving it, and Mario Kart World, but 1 month in, I'm more than ready for Donkey Kong, so I did get at least this one answer that references Donkey Kong. And I'm a little upset that you can't see online stats in Mario Kart. Biggest gripes are battery, lack of themes, lack of menu music. I just feel like the charm from older Nintendo systems is gone. So we can obviously kind of throw out the conversation about games and the Mario Kart versus Donkey Kong thing because, like I said, this was before Donkey Kong by literally a week. This was so close to Donkey Kong when I asked this question. But, brings up similar gripes. Again, a lot of people pointing out the battery. We all know the battery for the Switch 2 is unfortunately not awesome. For someone like me who still plays mostly on the TV, it's not a huge deal. I've already flown once and taken the Switch 2 on me for a plane flights and trips, staying somewhere out of state away from my home. And, it's for like a 2.5 hour flight. I had no issue playing the Switch 2 for like maybe 45 minutes. And that was fine. But yes, if you're going to play it for an extended time, handheld, the battery, it's just not awesome. And it sucks because, within a year, I bet they're going to release like an improved battery version, just like they did with the original Switch with the red box thing. And it's going to feel bad knowing that there's a better battery release of the Switch 2 out and that I don't have one. And I'm just guessing maybe they don't do that, but if they do, it'll just kind of feel bad, but it is what it is. Again, I play on the TV mostly, so I don't super care myself. The lack of themes, the lack of menu music, feeling like the charm of older Nintendo systems is gone. I mean, honestly, that conversation goes back to the original Switch. People were talking about that pretty much from the jump. Because let's be real, man. A lot of people didn't like the Wii U, and a lot of people didn't buy it. I know I'm preaching to the choir to you guys. You know me and my opinions if you already watch my channel. I love the Wii U. I still play the Wii U. I defend the Wii U. And yes, it's nice to have Miiverse, and it's nice to have menu music, and it's nice to have a virtual console eShop to shop for games you can purchase digitally for the Super Nintendo or the 64 or the whatever. And the Switch... And the 3DS, by the way, had the same charm at the same time that the Wii U was out. The Switch immediately killed all of that fun and charm of Nintendo's UIs and interactive experiences. We know that. I love the Switch. It's an amazing console. Switch 2, I love it myself as well. And it does suck to lose those things like the menu music and the themes. And if Nintendo ever introduces them, I'll be very happy. And I'll find a theme I like, and I'll enjoy listening to music when sifting through menus. Personally, I don't really need those, though, and I've always appreciated the sleeker, simpler, faster design of the Switch and the Switch 2 UI. So I understand the complaints about the themes and menu music, but personally, I'm not losing any sleep over not having them. FileID.diz, if I'm saying that right, says, I'm glad I held off. I am unimpressed. Maybe I'll consider when the OLED or Switch 2 Lite is released. Plus, there's nothing new to play if you're not into Mario Kart. I won't say it the way he phrased it, even though we know what he was trying to say when he said that. But yeah, I don't need to go down that road. And again, that's another thing, only Mario Kart was out when he answered. There was no Donkey Kong yet. So this is somebody who, to be fair, clearly didn't buy the Switch 2, so their opinion can only mean so much because they don't have any hands-on experience with the Switch 2 or own one themselves. They're not monetarily invested in the Switch 2 because they haven't spent $450 to buy one for themselves. But the sentiment, I think, is still valid because, if anything, we're still dissecting someone's purchasing choice and how what they've seen from the Switch 2 in terms of the tech, the design, and the games library at the time has convinced them to not buy it. They even mentioned the screen and said, well, there's not an OLED screen on it, so this person didn't want to buy it because they'd rather have a nicer screen than the LCD screen that the Switch 2 actually has. And they said maybe they'll even wait for a Switch 2 Lite, because in theory, a Switch 2 Lite would also probably be cheaper as well, right? Regardless of the screen. So, not much more to say about that other than I think it speaks to how in the several month build up to the release of the Switch 2, and at the time this person answered, just over a month after the Switch 2 has been on the market, they've yet to even see anything from the marketing and the build and the library of the Switch 2 to convince them to buy one. And I'm sure that a lot of people feel similar to that. Good Faith Gaming at Good Faith Gaming says, it's a backwards compatibility machine for me right now. I'm not that interested in Mario Kart World, but old Nintendo games that run better, like Echoes of Wisdom, are what I've been playing. So, like I mentioned earlier too, there are quite a few folks in the replies to my tweet who mentioned that most of what they're playing, or a lot of what they're playing, is just Switch 1 games that have, some performance and visual improvements and enhancements on the Switch 2. Because as we know, yes, you can buy the upgrades for the two Zelda games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but there's also a ton of Switch 1 games that just automatically get like an update and a performance boost simply by putting your Switch 1 cartridge into your Switch 2, which is really dope, I can't lie. I haven't really taken advantage of it at all. I've just been playing Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 Edition, Mario Kart, and now, for me, I've been playing Donkey Kong because I'm recording this after Donkey Kong has been out, and Donkey Kong is freaking awesome, by the way. In fact, one of my closest and best friends who has a Switch 2, he's been doing the same. He's said he's mostly playing Switch 1 games and enjoying the improvements and kind of going through some of his Switch 1 back catalog. And so I think that's a normal thing for a lot of people to do. We're still early in the generation, early in the Switch 2's life, 6-7 weeks in at this point. There's only 2 brand new first-party Nintendo games. Well, Welcome Tour counts as well, but you know what I mean. Mario Kart and Donkey Kong. That's all that's on the market right now. So yeah, early on, we're all very limited on what we can do to take advantage of our new machine. It was the same when the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X launched as well. You have to give things time to get going. And if you want to play something like Echoes of Wisdom and enjoy better performance on the Switch 2, it's something you can do. And so I think that's fine. Rabbit Emotion Designer at The Good Freelancer seems to be another person who's also yet to purchase one. Says, no point to buy it yet. Very concerned all the good designers at Nintendo are long gone, and the leap in power is just going to create more expensive and slower to develop games. It really seems like they've lost the plot and are corporatizing and sanitizing everything. So I chose this one because I think it's important to be able to showcase a variety of perspectives and opinions, and obviously I want to make sure not to just leave out negative opinions, because that's no fun. You have to look at the good and the bad and how people feel, because it's all valid. I don't know that I really agree with a lot of what this person's saying, but I thought it would just be interesting to kind of see that some folks feel this way. They said they're concerned all the good designers at Nintendo are long gone. What the hell are you talking about, man? Look at Mario Kart World, and again, I know Donkey Kong wasn't out at the time, but we knew about Donkey Kong, and by the time you answered this, the Donkey Kong Direct had already aired, so you should have already seen proof that Donkey Kong was going to be a great game and very well received, which it has been now that it's actually out after this person made this tweet response. We've got Metroid Prime 4 coming. We've got a new Hyrule Warriors game coming. We haven't seen Kirby Air Riders 2, but that's a game being made. Sakurai's involved. Sakurai himself working on Nintendo games. Clearly one of the most legendary and best game designers in the history of video games. not to mention so many other people who are there. And by the time we start seeing new Luigi's Mansion games and new Mario games and the next Zelda game, and if we get Metroid 6 and if Star Fox come back and another Pikmin, I mean, another Xenoblade game, dude, you can't tell me that good game designers are not present at Nintendo. That's crazy. Now, I support someone who says Nintendo's games were better in generations and decades past compared to today. You guys know me. I'm very nostalgic. I'm very old. I turned 45 last week, okay? So I was playing on the NES and the Super NES and the 64 all the way back, man. The Nintendo 64 is my favorite console of all time. The Nintendo GameCube is my second favorite console of all time. My favorite game ever created is Metroid Prime in 2002. So I think that Nintendo makes games today that are just as good, but I would totally respect someone who says Nintendo's games were better in the past, because I don't disagree. Mario 64, Super Metroid, better than most Nintendo games nowadays, in my opinion. That's just how I feel. But you're saying the good game designers are gone. That's just like objectively untrue. So there's that. You say the leap in power is going to create more expensive games and slower to develop games. Maybe. I mean, the unfortunate truth in today's gaming industry is that as power has increased and as monetization and the internet has allowed things to just kind of get worse and worse, or corporatized, as you said, and I don't know about sanitized. I don't know what you're trying to get at with that. But the corporatization, yeah, that stuff is prevalent in today's gaming industry. And I complain about it all the time in my videos when it's relevant. And I complain about it all the time on social media. When I'm on Twitter or Blue Sky, I find a reason to just always remind people that I think the gaming industry and the business of gaming is a lot worse today than it was in generations and decades past. So far, Nintendo really hasn't played in the worst spaces of today's industry, but the Switch 2 generation, I can be objective about this. It's brand new. I don't know what the Switch 2 is going to look like in 2 years. Maybe Nintendo does start to do some of those worst things. I don't predict that they will, because in general, they're pretty good about not doing those things, but we never know. So let's wait and see. We have to give time for this generation to develop before we say definitively Nintendo is doing things all the wrong ways. Mr. A Game says, I've played Mario Kart World literally every day, and I think the online update discourse is massively overblown. Very excited for Donkey Kong. Poor battery life is very noticeable. Would be interested to see how slow the screen is when we get a 120 hertz game, but for 99% of users, it's fine. So this is a person who basically seems to love the console and loves Mario Kart World. At the time, you guys might remember there was an update to how Mario Kart World Online worked online, or Mario Kart World worked online. And it was something I was kind of behind on and confused, and I made tweets about it. And I agree. At the time, when I found out what people were complaining about, I do think it was silly, but whatever. This person loves the Switch too. They love Mario Kart World. It seems to be keeping them very happy. They were stoked for Donkey Kong, so I'm sure he's playing it now. Poor battery life, brought up again. And then they mention what the screen is going to look like once we have a 120 hertz game. I assume Metroid Prime 4 will be the first game to do that, right? Do we know of anything that I'm just not thinking of or aware of? I'm obviously laser focused on Metroid, so we know that if you play Metroid Prime 4 in 1080, you can play it in 120 hertz, or 120 frames, I should say, 120 hertz on your TV. The Switch 2 screen can also do that, so in theory, playing it portably is going to be 1080, 120, also when playing it portably with your Switch 2. And so I think it's going to be very cool. I can't wait to see what that's like. And so, yeah, I guess I don't have anything more to say about that. I guess it'll just be interesting to see if Metroid is the first 120 FPS game, or if we get something else before that. RCT Gaming at Gaming RCT says the system has been great so far, but I predict you will find more negative spins, since that has been the engagement spin since April 2nd. That is actually true. Since the April 2nd Direct and the pre-launch. Gaming and tech media has a role in this as well. Maybe talking about something like a Digital Foundry or other tech reviewers. That aside, I'm excited to see what follows in the upcoming months ahead. So not a whole lot to take away from this, other than just another example of somebody who's very happy with the Switch 2, as I am as well. By the way, this is way more how I feel. And the whole negative spin thing, I mean, what do I say about that? Because, yeah, I mean, I think since the April 2nd Direct, and then even in the weeks leading up to the Switch 2's release in June, yeah, there's been a lot of negative news, and we've all had conversation about a lot of misinformation. So there's something to be said for how some people seem to be purposefully lying about negative things about the Switch 2, or just being obtuse and not even understanding facts about the Switch 2 and thinking something was true when it actually wasn't. And obviously, in the online age and social media age and people who are YouTubers making content taking advantage of negative news around the Switch 2, yes, there was some overblown stuff. But I also want to be cognizant of people who have their own fair criticisms. Because just because I love Nintendo and I love the Switch 2 doesn't mean that I should ignore someone who has fair negative critiques. Like, it's okay to not love Nintendo and not love the Switch 2. I think you need to make sure your opinions are based on facts and not the misinformation lies that have been spreading around the Switch 2 for months on end. But if it's something factual and something you don't like that is a true factual thing, that's fine. You're allowed to not like it or to be negative about it. So that's where I'm trying to, like, kind of toe the line between saying, yes, people were lying on purpose and that's really shitty and wrong, and they were doing it for engagement. Of course, everyone does that. But also saying, if you don't like it and it's based on a true thing that's bad, that's also okay. You're more than allowed to do so. So, yeah, that's how I feel about that. Mr. DMet at the Drake Mason says, happy with my purchase. I've been playing it a ton, especially revisiting Switch 1 games to see performance boosts. Age of Calamity in particular runs amazingly, and I am incredibly hyped for Donkey Kong and Metroid. Worth the price in my opinion. So, again, just like the last comment, mostly just sharing this because this is an example of someone who just loves the Switch 2, loves their experience, mostly playing Switch 1 games, as we've seen people mention, enjoying all the performance boosts, which I think is totally fine. And they were hyped for Donkey Kong, which is now out, and they're also excited for Metroid. And guess what? So am I. C at C2K78 says, feels like a generational leap every time I pick it up. Playing Tears of the Kingdom on it. So I think this is just another nice, simple, positive comment. I like that you say it feels like a generational leap every time you pick it up. I'll admit that I don't yet feel that, not even with Donkey Kong. It feels better for sure. I'm not going to say that, oh, it's more of a Switch Pro than a Switch 2. I've seen people say that, and I certainly don't feel that. Like, yes, it's a Switch 2. It feels like a Switch 2 to me, but at the same time, playing Mario Kart World, playing Donkey Kong Bonanza, as amazing as those games are, and also playing Cyberpunk, which I've spent a lot of time on, none of those make it feel like a true generational leap, and I'm somebody who's played all the way through Cyberpunk on the PS5 twice before I picked up and continued a different PS5 save on the Switch 2. So playing a slightly less good version of Cyberpunk on the Switch 2, even though it's incredible, that doesn't feel like a generational leap because I have the better version to play on the PS5. So Cyberpunk doesn't really help the case there. Mario Kart and Donkey Kong look great, they play great, and yes, I can tell that Donkey Kong isn't possible on the Switch 1, but not by much. I wish it felt like a bigger leap. I think the 4K version of Metroid Prime 4, the Switch 2 version of Metroid Prime 4, that's going to be when I truly feel like, oh, I'm playing a next-generation Nintendo console. It's going to blow me away. Metroid bias or not, I don't care. That's going to probably be the first time I say, this is next generation. Rez at the Immortal Ryan says, it's probably one of the worst first launch months in terms of games. Mario Kart World didn't really intrigue me too much. However, it's still a fun game. Only 3 GameCube games on Nintendo Switch Online to start was also a disappointment, as well as game key cards, but I still love the upgrade. So, you know, this person's kind of in the middle, which I think is fair. Clearly not happy with the games library to launch the console, which, I mean, again, I talked about this in a recent video. I think some people forget this, especially if you haven't lived through a lot of console launches. It's common for the first days, weeks, and months of a console to be slow. Like, that's actually normal. It's great when we get a killer app launch title for sure, like Mario Kart 64, Mario 64, Super Mario World, um, Demon Souls on the PS5 was fantastic. Obviously, Breath of the Wild is the big one. Mario Kart World for the Switch 2. It's nice to get a killer app launch title, but sometimes we also don't get a killer app launch title. So yeah, the first weeks and months, they'll be divisive. Being slow is kind of normal. This person also says they're not really a big Mario Kart World fan. So sure, that's going to hurt how you feel about, the first few games you can play on your console. I mean, complaining about the GameCube games available on NSO is a little strange to me because those are 20-year-old games you're playing anyway. I mean, we're lucky to have anything if you even use NSO. Like, I have a GameCube, so I play my GameCube games on an actual GameCube. I don't need the NSO thing, so I don't really care too much about that whole thing. And yeah, game key cards, we know, they suck for what they are. It's better than having digital only, but they're divisive for obvious reasons, and what are you gonna do? Well, believe it or not, those are the only comments that I pulled. It was just 10 of them. I think one of them got out of order because I didn't actually want to make a super negative one, the last comment. But I guess to be fair, that last one was, again, it was kind of more neutral than negative. They just started off very negative by saying it's one of the worst console launch months of all time. And I just think it's a standard console launch month, in my opinion. That's how I feel about that. So either way, yeah, that's just a very small taste of the responses I got. And I think that, it kind of represents a wide variety of opinions that people have about the Switch 2. Again, I asked this question and these responses came in about 5 weeks after the console had launched and before Donkey Kong had released. So that's kind of how people were feeling at that time. I'm sure Donkey Kong helped adjust a lot of people's opinions. Maybe not everybody, but I'm sure a lot. So it's worth considering that, like I said at the beginning here. But yeah, I think overall, if I was to just kind of put some kind of a assessment and summary on how I feel people are feeling based on my responses to my tweet, I think for the most part, people like the Switch 2. People don't like the battery. They miss some Nintendo charm, but having Mario Kart and Donkey Kong early on seems to be something that satisfies a lot of people. And people like what the device seems to be and the promise of the future. So people are feeling mediocre to positive and optimistic about it. That's kind of what I see right now based on these answers that came 5 weeks after the launch. So kind of fun, I think, to go through this stuff and discuss it with you guys. I've mentioned it myself on my own videos in the past. I love the Switch 2. I'm very happy with what it is so far. Mario Kart and Donkey Kong are enough to keep me happy. And Metroid Prime 4 is coming soon. That's all I really care about now. We just need that date. Once we get the Prime 4 date, man, oh boy, it's going to be on. So, yeah, this was kind of fun. Tell me what you guys think about the conversations. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.